Hey everyone, I'm Luke.
And Max?
Welcome back to Upside Down Thoughts, Episode 5, the Las Vegas recap. So we're going to jump right into it with qualifying, led by Max himself here.
Yeah, so nothing really crazy for Vegas. Besides the pole sitter was really the only difference. It was Spire's first ever pole. It was Michael McDowell. He might as well call him the Rocket Man of the current time. Taking Ryan Newman's nickname over. Ryan Newman obviously said how many poles was that in his
Oh,
back
over
in like the
10
early
for sure.
2000s. Yeah, he said over 10 poles. And, McDowell, I feel like no matter what equipment he's in, he's always somehow manages to be fast at pretty much anywhere or whenever equipment he's in. But then following him, a couple Fords, Chevy and Kyle Busch, the hometown kid. You got Eric Jones with a great starting time up in the top 10. Bowman, of course, another Vegas winner. Josh Berry, good starting position there. Zane Smith, top 10, with Byron and Larson, your Hendrick Chevys in the top 10 as well. You see Joe Gibbs Racing outside the top 10 with a mix of both the colleague cars and one of the Trackhouse cars in Ross Chastain. And then a few more Chevys, Toyotas, and Fords between 20th to 30th with Shane Van Gisbergen, Brad Keselowski, and Carson Hocevar, and even Chase Briscoe back there. And outside the top 30, you got your one-year Spire cars, your 2311 car in Riley Earps, and your Rick Ware Racing car in Cody Ware, with Ryan Blaney starting in the back after, I believe, a practice crash, correct?
Yep. Good
Yes,
stuff.
that's
Good
all I've got
stuff.
for qualifying.
That's
So
perfect.
you take over right into the race.
All right. And, you mentioned Michael McDowell getting his first pole with Spire. He's done it plenty of times back in that 34 car for front row. But, starting at
Yeah,
Las Vegas.
no, I'm sorry, but
No, you're good.
it's great to see for McDowell. I mean, I just want to elaborate on this more.
Mhm.
He's had poles at these super speedways, and I think this is his first pole at a non super speedway. In not to kind of throw Spire under the bus, but not the best equipment, and. He said after qualifying that he was able to run wide open. So, you got to give a shout out to that team for setting up a car for their driver to be able to run wide open at Las Vegas instead of pole lap. That's a heck of a setup. I
Yeah,
just got to give them a little bit of an
100%.
applause for that because that's just a great job by the 71 team.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on, Spire taking a bunch of leaps this off season, getting Justin Haley, a young super speedway driver, and then even getting Rodney Childress to crew chief that car. I mean, it's just great stuff from them. So
Yeah,
getting a
that could have
veteran
a
McDowell,
huge part of it.
yeah, McDowell, a veteran in the sport, helps for those two young guys.
Yeah, especially, I think that'll definitely be a team to watch out for, the rest of this season. We've already seen a few great runs out of Hocevar. Haley, we really haven't seen a whole much, but I think it's been going around. He's been having a little bit of spotter problems with, I think it's Stephen Parsons up on
Hmm.
the spotter stand. Been having a few miscommunications. That team hasn't really been meshing great, but if that team can really find something and really lock in on the chemistry side of things, I think that team could even be a threat, especially coming with Talladega in the coming weeks. They're a team to watch out for.
Correct. You know, and as we kind of move into the start of the race here, obviously Logano on the inside, qualifying second with Busch behind him. Um, as we started the race, Michael McDowell would lose the lead decently quickly, but he would stay up in that top five range for a while. But Logano would kind of overpower him with that Penske speed. But overall, yeah, a pretty normal qualifying, other than a few oddballs, um, in the top 10, top 15 area. But one driver I do want to touch on a little bit is Josh Berry and how he's having an incredible start to this season. That 21 Wood Brothers car. We'll touch on him a little bit more in this race, but great starts for him.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
hmm, and then
Yeah.
good.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. But
Yeah, I say with Josh Berry, the thing is that's a team that hasn't seen a win outside of a super speedway in quite a few years.
it's a good point.
I think their last win that wasn't a super speedway It might have even been prior to Benedetto. It might have been when Blaney was in that car. I'm
Yeah, it
not
was.
really
I think
sure.
it was Blaney at Pocono.
Yeah, I can't really give you a whole much on that Wood Brothers past. I'm gonna be honest, because it's quite an interesting past with I think it was Harrison Burton, Matt Benedetto. I think Paul Menard might have even been in that car for a
Yeah,
little bit.
then Blaney, then Trevor Bayne. I mean, list goes on.
Yeah, that car's got a history. A lot of Daytona wins with that car. It's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty awesome team over there with Wood Brothers, but to see what they're going to be able to put together this year is going to be interesting. I'll let you get back to the race.
Oh, yeah, good point. Great points. Like I said, Logano, and then I feel like we're saying these Penske guys all the time, but Austin Cindric would quickly move up into that lead over McDowell. But Ryan Blaney, as you mentioned, crashed in practice, had to start during the rear. As we're kind of moving in the first 10, 15 laps, he's already moved up to 20th position. So um, obviously, you can tell he has a speedy car back there. But then, Alex Bowman and William Byron, the two Hendrick boys, moving their ways up into the top 10. No surprises. But we did have a little bit of a pit road incident with Blaney trying to kind of short pit a little bit in here in stage one. And he had a kind of wheel axle issue. And it would end up costing him 2 laps in pit road. So all his work would be completely diminished away, and he would re-enter the track 2 laps down.
Yeah, especially with Blaney, he's one who in the field has he's very emotional to say the least. So it's tough, especially for that 12 team with Jonathan Hassler, and I believe it's is it Tim Fedwa up top
Yep.
as a spotter. And it's tough, especially with the new spotter. Fedwa's coming over from Harvick, and Hassler's been there a while, but sometimes I think you see struggles with that team of being able to keep each other cool, and following this moment, it's kind of looking into the future of this race a little bit. But this team will rebound, which is really nice to see, because this is a team that I feel like they can be doing great, have something happen as a form of adversity, and then really struggle after that. So it was good to see that this team rebound again after this pit stop. That's what I've got there on that.
Yeah, it was a good points. He's obviously had a little bit of a spotter issues getting used to Tim, like you said. But Blaney has always been that kind of hot headed when he gets into situations in the past. But this year and kind of last year, he gets angry and gets mad, but he puts his head down and goes to work when the time is needed. So he will have
Yeah,
some luck coming in this race for sure.
yeah, he's got that passion coming in the right way.
Yeah.
He knows what he has the ability to do, and he wants to get it done. So when things like that happen, you're on these top tier teams where these things shouldn't be happening. It really, like, I feel like it gets to him, but he's really, I feel like from past years even, he's really doing a great job of not only him but his team as well of staying locked after things like that are happening. Those forms of adversity that I'm mentioning. But moving on from there, you've got the race going green after, or staying green after Blaney's pit stop. And green flag pit stops would start, and Chase Briscoe would go in and lose a wheel on his way out after a loose wheel, and would bring the caution out on lap 34, leading to some more pit stops.
Yeah, this one was interesting. And I kind of could sense a caution coming when all these kind of Logano, Larson, Suarez, Hamlin all try to short pit a little bit. We see Briscoe lose that wheel after pitting. So just, unlucky things for that 19 team who's definitely had some setbacks this year, but kind of opened the door for some drivers to get some of that front row light. Bush. Toyota's Wallace and Reddick, 23XI, were kind of moving their way up um, before that caution. So they'll kind of restart ahead of the field a little bit.
Yeah, and right before we go green after those pit stops, there's a few things to mention. The Vegas speeding police was absolutely nailing drivers this weekend. I don't know what the reason was for it, but I don't think we've ever seen this many speeding penalties at least every Vegas race I've ever watched. It was ridiculous this past week.
hmm Yeah, I mean, that's a great point to bring up. And, kind of the drivers were talking about it during and after the race. But, I mean, it's one of the hardest pit roads to enter. You're off of turn 4, and you have that apron and that kind of track banking, and there's no real room for error. You either spin your car or you speed pretty much, and there's kind of no in between. So getting down on that banking or the apron, I should call it, and slowing down your car to the right RPM. I mean, it's incredibly tough, and saw a hefty amount of speeding penalties come from that.
Yeah, it's hard enough to slow down on that low lane without spinning your car on the apron, and then to to be able to make that hard left on the pit road because it's not your Daytona pit road or anything where you have these guys filing out 5-6 wide to get on the pit road. There's it's thin enough to say it, but it's right off the corner of turn three. It's a blind pit road, and it's a low pit road speed. I think it's only 55 at Las Vegas. So with it being an extremely difficult pit road to get onto, you see not only you see Kyle Busch speed at this pit stop and many other drivers coming later in this race. But that brings us back to green. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I just want to make one more quick point about how you kind of said it's a blind pit road. At Las Vegas, it's a very linear run track. There's kind of two, maybe three lines that you can efficiently run. So, if you get up to those points where there's three, four, five cars behind you, I mean, you got to be perfect to get on pit road if you don't want to cause a caution. Just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as we kind of move into the green flag run here, Austin Cindric continuing to lead, but we see Alex Bowman and a couple of the Hendrick guys behind him. Chase Elliott and Larson kind of make their presence known a little bit, starting. Oh, obviously, two unbelievable 1.5 mile drivers. But as we move closer and near the end of the stage, Cindric, this is an interesting fact here. He led more laps today than in his entire 1.5 mile Cup career combined. So that is just crazy stuff, and he's obviously been developing well for that Penske team.
Yeah, I would believe that, honestly. When I think of Austin Cindric, I have three tracks come to mind. Well, actually four. I'll
You want me
give
to
you the
guess?
three of the. Yeah, I guess if you'd like.
Well, Daytona.
Yeah.
Okay. He is kind of that road course kind of ringer, if you mind. I mean, I was gonna say like a Sonoma or
Yeah,
Watkins, but
it's great, valid point. I didn't even go there. At Sonoma last year, he went airborne. So who knows? He thinks he's Doc Hudson.
I feel like I have to say Talladega.
Yeah, of course, both super speedways. He almost seems to be one of those pace cars leading laps. Almost gives that Dale Earnhardt Jr. vibe.
Yeah, and then the third track. Ooh, this is gonna be tough. I mean,
Still
my
think
gut
super speedway.
still thinks okay. I mean, my gut goes to Atlanta or Michigan. Those are just where
Yeah, I gotta go Atlanta. He
Atlanta.
always
Yeah,
seems to be up there. He's known for his four wide pass. I would think it was last year. Was it 2 years ago now? But
last year.
yeah, that absolutely amazing pass going from all the way from the top down the front straightaway to the bottom and passing three cars on his outside. So that's absolutely amazing pass. And of course, might throw fourth in there. WWT St. Louis. He wins a race there after his teammate runs out of fuel.
Yep.
So that's a tough one for you being a Blaney fan, but
Nah, that's all right.
and that only being a mile track. So it's really great to see this third Penske car. We mentioned this in past weeks. Cindric, this two car, really coming alive, almost giving you those Keselowski vibes from previous years when he used to be in that car.
Yeah, right.
So
That's a good
it's
point.
really great to see that the two car is kind of back and it's almost like been revived back to that Penske strength.
That's great points. And speaking of Austin Cindric, obviously he wins the stage. No surprises there. Um, Followed by Alex Bowman, Elliott, Wallace, and Larson, rounding out that top five for the end of stage one. And I'll let you kick it off with stage two.
Yeah, so after stage one, that we would find out after Cindric winning that he would be the ninth different stage winner, as Mike Joy had mentioned, after the end of that first stage. But following that, we would have the pit stops, and following the ending of stage one, where Chase Elliott was caught speeding once again, just like Kyle Busch earlier, and he was now the second person speeding. I'm actually going to keep a counter on this because I'd like to see how many sped throughout this race because I'd be willing to say it was probably double digits.
I would agree.
Yeah, but anyway, back to the pit stop. We we see Bubba Wallace and Austin Cindric get off first, so they will take the green after the pit stops, and Wallace will clear for the lead out of turn 2, where then Bowman would recognize a vibration. Even after his first pit stop, they had thought I believe it was something to do with possibly a loose wheel at the end of the first stage, which they would find out was not the problem, as he would pit right after the beginning of the stage, putting his hand out the window, which I actually noticed, and there was no comment on it during the race, but I like to say that I actually noticed that, and I knew he was going to pit before he even did. But yeah, he pits from fourth with the vibration, and then Larson closes in on Wallace, eventually passing him, leading us to an 88 spinning on the backstretch, Shane Van Gisbergen from 28th after a potential blown tire.
Yep, and kind of on the Alex Bowman point, didn't really mention what was really going on with him, but kind of over the spotter and crew chief radio, they were kind of mentioning it could have been like a drivetrain or wheelbase kind of issue there, where it was just bouncing up and down repeatedly and wasn't stable. But I guess we'll never truly know the answer to that one. But like you said, SVG kind of self spin out of 2. Obviously, we're going to comment more on him kind of more into the race because he had a few other problems, but it's expected. His first full time season with the Cup Series, he was full time Xfinity last year, and the Cup car is levels ahead of the Xfinity car, and stuff like this is going to happen. I'm not really surprised about this.
Yeah, and this one, it kind of brings you back to the thing almost that we were talking about last week with Catherine Legg, with allowing these drivers to come in that don't have a whole lot of Cup experience. And it even goes to show you that after an Xfinity year, these Cup cars are not easy to drive. So I almost want to make a point back on Legg as of last week. If you watched last week's podcast or episode, we talk about Catherine Legg having no practice at all, and even in any sort of NASCAR, whether it be a truck, Xfinity car, or Cup car. And you have Shane Van Gisbergen, who ran an entire season in the Xfinity series, and these things are still happening to him in the Cup series. So it just really goes to show you that if you have not raced one of these cars before, NASCAR should not be letting you right into the Cup series. That's just my opinion on that. I feel like I have a very strong opinion on that, but NASCAR's got to fix that from my viewing point.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Obviously SVG is an incredible driver, but I would like to see at least another year in Xfinity to get his development right. It feels like we're kind of just throwing even these young guys coming up from, they'll just get thrown in the Truck Series or Xfinity. I mean, it takes development like any other sport to get 100% capability to drive these Cup cars. It as niche as it is to say, I mean, it's the fastest stock car in the world. And I think people forget that sometimes, that this is a real sport.
Yeah, you have people that don't know much about the sport saying, "Oh, the cars turn left. They turn left again. They turn left again." No, these drivers are fighting. You're fighting the wheelbase of the car. The car might be tight. The car might be loose. There's people that I feel like don't exactly realize these things. It's not an easy sport. You mentioned development. You have a lot of these drivers who come up through sprint cars. They come up through modified, through whatever these other series are. That these series that they should be racing in, and even though they're very different, it's a form of motorsport racing, and I think there's got to be more experience there. Catherine Legg obviously coming from her own series over in IMSA herself. IMSA, you're driving one of the most easy to handle race cars in the world, and the supercars. So you're going from one of the easiest to handle to probably, in my opinion, one of the hardest race cars in the world to handle.
Yeah, I agree. Those supercars are made to do those sharp turns and, be able to run under incredible conditions from the driver. You can whip those things around. And these cars, I mean, they are like driving on literal ice. I mean, the minute steering changes and braking changes and gas changes and how careful you have to be in this car is unlike I've ever seen in any racing series in the world.
Yeah, it's another great point, but I guess I got my venting in on that topic from last week. But
Yep.
moving on after that, we see some more pit stops. after the SVG spin.
I have a lot to
Uh,
say about these pit stops.
yeah, well, you have Wallace get off pit road first, followed by Byron and Larson. So Wallace has got his strong day going. Byron and Larson maintaining their way up front. But then I'll let you get all over the point that you've been literally foaming from the mouth to make from before we even started this podcast.
I just love this. It's just hilarious. I mean, so I was after the SVG spin, we saw the pit stops. The pit stops dilemma, I'll call it. Christopher Bell came in, didn't get that left rear tire completely tight. So guess what they did? Instead of coming back down pit road and getting that penalty, they pulled into his teammate of Chase Briscoe, the 19 car, and their jackman and tire changer got that car up and tightened it. So he obviously had to drop to the back, but he got significantly less penalized if he would have just had to drive around the entire track and risk losing that wheel. So I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, now I want to know how Adam Stevens, crew chief of Chris Bell, I want to know how he knew this. Because there were some crew chiefs and drivers mentioned after the race that they didn't even know this was a rule.
I
Now,
didn't know it either.
where is the problem there that your own competitors don't even know your sport's rules?
Well, sometimes I feel like the NASCAR rulebook is like an ancient relic that only some people can find. Sometimes,
Yeah,
half the people know the rules, half of them don't. So,
yeah, no, you're honestly exactly right. It takes me back to Coda a few weeks ago. I know this is like a flashback podcast, but Coda with the turn 6 track limits. You have these rules that I feel like you're making up halfway through the race. You have AJ who's going, what do you mean there's no track limit in turn 6? I thought there was. I thought you said there was in the pre-race meeting. So I don't know. Maybe if they got to extend these pre-race meetings, make them longer, explain the rules more thoroughly, or what's being said and kind of behind closed doors that you can't see. It's really interesting to say and see. But something I was very curious about. Do you think the 19's team even knew what they were supposed to do? Like, how do you make
I
that radio transmission so
I don't
fast?
think you. I don't. Yeah, I don't think you can make that transmit that fast. I mean, there's no way. Um, I mean, um,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe
If
they
I
knew the
was,
rule. I'm not sure.
yeah, if I was the Jackman, I'd see this green 20 car pull into our pit box, and I'd be like, well, right team, wrong one though, wrong one. But yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
a very funny.
I'd like that's a great point. I'd love to hear the radio transmits from both teams if there were any.
Yeah, that's kind of your incident of the day, so to speak. I'd say at least for Las Vegas, that might be incident of the season so
Yeah,
far.
I don't know if we'll see that again.
Yeah, but
Um,
followed by that, we will remain under caution for a few more laps. You'll see Christopher Pell be penalized 2 laps for pitting in his teammate Briscoe's box. And Cindric will come down a second time due to being concerned of a loose wheel, which brings me to another thing I wanted to mention. We see quite a few loose wheels in this race, and I'm a little curious because I think we had only seen one tire lost prior to Vegas's race, and I believe it was at Coda with Larson. So I would love to know what was going on this week at Vegas. I don't know if you have any input on that, or
well, here's my opinion, and obviously I'm not a pit crew member, but with Vegas being one of the shorter pit roads, the time of error and the time to get on and off pit road is very, very minimal and very short. So I think these pit road members were under so much stress, obviously, because they wanted to get out in front first, because track position is everything at Las Vegas and these 1.5s with this car. I think that just a lot of mistakes were happening because under the stress tolerances that they were under. Um, Obviously, everyone wants to win Las Vegas. Anyone really can, um, with, it's being run twice a year. So that's just my kind of opinion on it.
yeah, it's great points there. It's yeah, you got to remember it's a race. Even when they're under caution, it's a race. It's
Hmm.
so it's very valid that it's still a hustle when you're under a pit stop or whatever. Unless it's this mid race break in the Arc Menard series, it's the pace does not slow down even on a pit stop. So I'm really
Right.
glad you mentioned there.
Yeah, and just one extra little point, it's not all on the tire changer. Sometimes it's on the jack man. If they drop that jack a quarter of a second too quickly, that right rear, left front, um, left rear is not going to get tight because once that car drops, you're not getting that tire tight. So it could be a mix of different things.
Yeah, especially as soon as the driver feels that jack drop, he's going. He's not even
Yeah,
waiting
he's
for the
going.
crew to go, 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 go. He's off.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's good points.
a few great points there, and that'll let us take a little deeper dive into the caution about a lap later. Uh, you see Bubba Wallace lead the restart from the inside, Byron from the outside, and Kyle Busch exiting turn two up in the outside wall. And guess what happens?
I wonder what happens. Loses a
Yeah,
wheel.
tire comes off. So I I don't really know what to say. I mean, outside of what we've said already, that I guess it's just maybe a better job needs to be done at these tracks, or they need to find an easier way to keep these tires on because they're lucky that this is a big track and there's really nothing. There's nothing in the infield from the backstretch, and there's no backstretch grandstand. But if these wheels keep coming off and these get hit by another car or whatever, there's no outside possibility of what could happen at these tracks. So
Hmm.
it's I just see a problem with it. Like, NASCAR's already giving out the crew chief suspension, and they're telling two pit members to go take a 2-week vacation for a suspension. So maybe NASCAR needs to get more or needs to penalize harder on this. I just see it as too much of an imminent danger with how often it's happening. It's okay if it happens, here nor there, once every third week or once a month, whatever. But we see it in this race. We're only on lap 115. We've seen it happen 3 times already with Briscoe, Cindric, who said he had a loose wheel. Bowman had his vibration, which could have possibly been a loose wheel. So it's honestly close to 5 times. I guess I'm just very passionate about this, but it shouldn't be happening.
No,
Simple as
it's
that.
great points, and I'll add a little bit onto that. But in the Indy 500, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, a tire got launched over the catch fence and into the parking lot. I mean, with how fast these things are spinning, how fast these cars are going, and how frequently these tires are coming off in the Cup Series, there needs to be some sort of rule change to, as soon as that tire comes off, a red flag or comes out or something, or caution then a red flag to get these drivers to stop because, it could launch in the grandstands and, I mean, t- uh, knock someone out, really, really injure a lot of people. So a rule change, something needs to happen.
Yeah, there's got to be a heavier penalty. I guess that's all. That's my 2 cents on that. But moving on from there, we see Denny Hamlin get the free pass and Kyle Busch penalized for 2 laps for the loose wheel. Where then Bowman, McDowell pit, and guess what happens to both of them? They're caught for speeding. Vegas has got 2 more victims there. Bush goes back behind the wall for repairs after scraping the wall when losing his wheel, and it brings us to another restart. I'll let you take it back from there with the racing.
Yep, and as we said before, the Hendrick, Larson, and Byron duo, who we've been saying a lot this season, and then obviously Reddick behind him. They would take the lead to start the green flag at lap 120, and soon after that, we had Shane Van Gisbergen experiencing another setback um, as he loses another right front while running kind of into the back 30th to 35th range, and he would kind of coast it down in the apron and try to make it back to pit road. Um, and he would eventually do that as the tire or the kind of wheelbase would kind of sit in the apron area.
Yeah, that just makes me want to kind of elaborate on it again. It's another loss of a tire. It's on the backstretch. NASCAR can say, "Oh, there's no fear of any fans, spectators getting hurt on the backstretch." Well, it's not true at all tracks. So I takes me back to saying that NASCAR has got to make a change there. But moving on from there, we see Reddick get by the first Hendrick car and Byron for second, and caution comes out again as Gilliland and Stenhouse get together.
Yep. And, you know, kind of that typical Las Vegas wreck. I guess you can call it the big one if you want to, if there that even is a thing at Las Vegas. But, Gillen just, running as hard as he can, kind of hits the wall, exiting four and collects Stenhouse, and then hitting kind of that. Um, wall again area, same area. Just a typical Las Vegas wreck, not giving an inch as Stenhouse is a very aggressive driver, and so is Gillen starting to become one. So no surprises for me there.
Yeah, and I honestly think Stenhouse does a great job there to not spin out. Because we've seen previous incidents, previous years. You see 2 years ago with Wallace Larson getting together. Obviously, that's a little bit harder of a contact, but Larson spins back across, collects Christopher Bell in the playoffs. And then last year, you see the quote unquote Las Vegas big one. You see Elliott go around, Keselowski, a few others. You see Reddick spin through the infield. He ends up flipping a flip at Las Vegas, and
Hmm.
it's honestly quite ridiculous depending on how you look at that. But we've seen a few incidents like that, and it's a great job by Stenhouse to keep that from not getting any worse.
Right, good points. And as we kind of move away from the caution, we kind of see these two tire stop strategy come out to play as a couple, Chastain, Jones, Hamlin, and Larson, or excuse me, Larson would take the four tires. But some of the Toyotas and some of the Trackhouse members would be taking that two tire stop. It's a tongue twister.
Yeah, so all from there, we got the restart, I believe, with you mentioned Chastain, Trackhouse on the inside, Eric Jones on the outside. Great to see him up there, where Chastain will clear him with no problem by turn three. But here come Larson and Byron. They will absolutely fly by Jones and Chastain, and they will clear for 1-2 yet again.
Yep. So, Eric Jones, and just a little point on him, incredible job he's done for Legacy this year, really being that veteran presence that they've needed for that team. Um, but as we kind of move closer into the laps here, a ton of lead changes that I would just want to comment on because I've been hearing a lot on social media about, how the crazy lead changes have been in these past few races, and I just want to say I'm not surprised at all. We're in the fourth year of this car, and drivers are really starting to find what works and what doesn't, as we kind of saw in the later years with the Gen 6 car. That's why we're seeing a lot of the same names run up in the front. The Bell, Byron, Larson, Elliott, Blaney. Um, these drivers have figured out this car finally, and that's why I think we saw like a top speed of 190 at Las Vegas. I think I saw. Um, so the drivers are finally starting to master this car. Um, so great stuff with all
Yeah,
the lead changes here.
yeah, it's really awesome to see. I mean, as especially with you mentioned, you got kind of the names that everyone gets sick of running up front yet again. But I kind of see it as a way of the racing comes alive. You really start to see people realizing that instead of just somewhat letting someone pass them, they can press them, they can block, they can stay in that battle. Like as you'll see a little bit later in this race. But when you're side by side with someone, you don't see exactly a driver letting off. You see that driver push it into the corner, stay side by side through the corner. So I think as these drivers are getting better and better with these cars, I think the battles you're going to see are just going to get better and better.
Right, it's good points, and we kind of see that. I guess villain arc, as you can kind of say, come out. The Hamlins, the Bushes, because they finally kind of understood this car and are giving people no room for error. That's why you kind of see Bell have already 3 wins this season. They've
Yeah,
mastered every track with this car.
you can really see the personality starting to come out
Yeah,
uh,
so
through the cars.
took a little bit, but we're back. But we'll finally wrap up stage two. That was a bit of a long stage, but we had a lot of points to make. Larson, no surprise here, wins stage two. Excuse me, with Byron, Chastain, Wallace, Hocevar rounding out that top five. So see that.
Yeah, I did want to mention there that Kyle Larson will be our first repeat stage winner of the year. It's pretty crazy with Cindric winning the first stage of Vegas, being the ninth different stage winner this year. To see Larson be your first two-stage winner of the year, in my mind, is kind of mind-blowing. And that, again, shows you on the point we just made that uh, these drivers are competing at the front. You don't have a guy driving away anymore like you've seen in previous years.
Yep, good points there. And that's crazy. Fifth race in we're just now seeing the first repeat stage winner. So just excuse me, bringing us back to our points that every driver is finally mastering this car. But obviously, more pit stop strategy. I feel like we said that 10 times today. But some 2 tire stops, some 4 tire stops, and some setbacks. Ty Gibbs and Hocevar had a bit of a run in on pit road. The typical, um, Las Vegas pit road stuff. There's absolutely no room for error on pit road, like we were saying. So the stalls are tight, the pit road short, and it's chaos.
Yeah, you see, yet again, Busch gets his second speeding penalty of the race. Gibbs is caught speeding even after his pit stop trouble with Hocevar at his box. Ty Dillon's caught taking equipment from his box that would stay attached to the car. I believe it was a gas can. So just a lot of pit road problems at the end of stage 2. And we will again see after that, you see Chris Bell come down pit road again, and they will go under the hood to make an adjustment. Barry coming back to pit road
Yep.
to tighten our right front wheel to make sure, I believe that would be our 7th wheel to fall off this race, which is just ridiculous. But following the pit stops, we're back to green again. Stage 3 is finally underway. You see McDowell lead from the inside, Austin Dillon from the outside on his short pit, and
Yeah, I have a
McDowell will
lot to say
clear
about this.
exiting turn 2 and allow you to go from here.
And now I'm going to try to refrain my words a little bit from this because this just makes me a little bit heated up. I'm fine with Michael McDowell doing his thing. Austin Dillon, it's just blasphemous. I mean, you have no speed the entire day, and you do a quick pit stop to get yourself out in the lead, and then you get blown by and drop back into like 25th. It's childish, and it doesn't belong in the top series. I mean, you were up there for like 3 seconds. I don't even think he made it into turn 1 without even being overtaken by a Larson or 3 wide or whatever it was. It just makes me so angry because you don't need to be up there.
Yeah, I believe he was already outside the top 5 or even the top 8 after the first lap.
Yeah, it's
Back
just
grid.
stupid.
I believe even cost us to go 4, maybe even 5 wide exiting turn 2 because he's stuck in the middle and he's got all these cars on 4 tires that are way faster. Have been running up front in the top 10 all race, but this has been the philosophy of that 3 car, for many previous years, and there were a few races last year where this car had speed, but this is just one of those races where there's no speed in that 3 car, and I know you're trying to get position. Las Vegas is a positioning track, but on that first lap, when everyone's bunched up and you're going that much slower, you're spinning tires, whatever, can't make it through turn 2 at speed. You're holding up the cars behind you. And these leaders are gonna get away, and you're gonna be the reasoning for it. So I absolutely 100% agree with you there. It's just better decisions have got to be made by that 3 car.
Yeah, I mean, and I could talk about this for an hour. I mean, at some point you got to blame the driver. So at some point you have to get him out of that 3 car and put him back in the Xfinity series for a year. Get someone else because RCR is absolutely it's a dying company right now, and if they want to do anything, it's the first step to get him out of that car.
Yeah, that team's not held alive by much more than Kyle Busch himself. And Kyle Busch, even for the most part, I mean, he's had a few good runs this year, but he can't finish a race. He
Yep.
runs first in Coda for 75% of the third stage and then finishes 6th. So yeah, you get points from 6th, but you only get half of what you get winning the race. So I have an opinion on RCR, and not that I'm anyone to say it, but I think some changes have got to be made there. They have already in the past, moving Andy Petrie up to, I believe it was director of race operations or
Yep.
whatever. But they got to find different leadership or whatever Richard Childress has got to do to get that team trending back in the right direction.
Yeah, great, fantastic points. I mean, you're not getting any development because he's been running in 30th for 36 out of 36 races. I mean, he'll be up there at some points running top 10, top 20. I mean, but it's just childish stuff, and it doesn't need to happen because you want to be in the lead for 3 seconds. I mean, come on, give me a break. It doesn't belong in the top series.
Yeah,
But
I got
I'll
nothing.
calm down now. That was just really annoying.
Yeah, you got your rant. I got my vent earlier with the loose wheels. You got your Austin Dillon rant in. So.
Yeah, that was that's good to get out.
Anyway, after stage 3 had finally gone green, Austin Dillon is back to 8th after about the first lap. We see Suarez move up in the second, and Byron challenge McDowell, falling back to third after restarting first. But then we see Chastain challenge his teammate, his Trackhouse teammate Suarez for third. And Blaney has moved into the top 5. Remember that name?
I do.
Yeah, so you see Ryan Blaney back in the top 5 after his 31-second pit stop. He starts the race dead last, up to 20th, falls all the way to the back on his 31-second stop, and he is all the way back up to 5th by the end of stage 3. I would love to see his race graph, which, if you don't know what that is, like as a NASCAR fan, it's basically just a graph that shows you as the race trended on, the position the driver was in. That thing had to have looked like a mountain range.
Yeah, that's great points. And kind of during the race, they were kind of talking about how his radio was just completely silent for that entire time. He was 2 laps down, had to get the free pass twice, and he worked his way back up in the top 5. Maybe some younger drivers can take a little bit of um, advice from him and watch his race, and see. If you're 2 laps down, the race isn't over. You got to put your head down and go to work.
Yeah, it's another flashback. Here's flashback number 3. But Michael McDowell, what was it? A few weeks ago, what race was it?
Oh, God, Atlanta, Coda. I
I think it
can't
might have
remember
been
which
Atlanta.
one. Yeah, I think it was Atlanta. I can't remember though.
But he had, well, I think it's 7 free pass, or what was it? 5, 6,
Oh
7
yeah,
free pass.
it was. I now remember it was Atlanta. Yeah, he had like 7 or 8 free passes.
And he finished that race on the lead lap in the top 20. Like
Hmm.
that just goes to show you can be laps down. Your race is not over with how NASCAR does their free pass, their lucky dog, their wave arounds. We really beat up on NASCAR, and a lot of fans really do. But there's some things that they really have great in the sport, and in my opinion, though, their lap down process and how to get your laps back, I think NASCAR's really got that down perfectly. And I gotta say,
Hmm.
I love how NASCAR runs their lap down policies.
I agree. That's great points there. Um, and as we move past the Blaney kind of moving in the top 5, he doesn't get much time in the top 5 before Cody Ware crashes in 3 and 4. Kind of that's a single car accident and bring out the caution flag.
Yeah, this is actually a little bit of a hard crash. We see you think he might have just spun, but he gets up into the outside wall, spinning into turn 3, actually. So it's not that he spun exactly in the corner. He actually spun prior to the corner. I believe it could have been on a blown tire, or maybe even on a brake rotor, because let's be honest, we don't know what Cody Ware's hitting in that car. It could be the brakes for all we know at Las Vegas. But hey, there's my my Cody Ware. I can't exactly think of the word, but my Cody Ware attack for the race. But he has a hard hit. The front left wheel of that car is almost completely off, very similar to Chris Buescher's flip a few years ago at Charlotte. We see that tire come completely off. So we're lucky Vegas doesn't have grass down there, or who knows what would have happened at a greater speed than Charlotte or when Buescher flipped. But moving on from there, we see a bunch more pit stops. Todd Gilliland back on the lead lap with his free pass. Chastain is off first with Larson, Cindric, and Elliott. Cindric and Elliott both on 2 tires. Larson, Chastain have got their 4. Ty Gibbs is spun around by his pit stall again by Carson Hocevar. I want your opinion on this because I want to know if this is frustration or if this was just a complete coincidence with how these two have been having their pit road problems this race.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the driver that's in their pit stall has the right of way, correct? Before the driver that enters?
Yes,
Or is it
yeah,
the
I
other
believe
way?
so.
Okay.
No, especially when the one that's in his box already leaving is on
Yeah.
the lead lap, and the one that's pulling in is not.
Yeah, so this is just Ty Gibbs' fault completely. I mean, you don't have the right of way and you like cut Hocevar's nose off. Um and then you go on the radio and blame him for it. I mean, I'm not even surprised because Ty Gibbs being that young driver who has no temper just no thought process at all. Um I feel like I'm
Yeah,
ranting on every driver this episode, but it's childish.
yeah, Hocevar is this young guy too that has made his problems at Atlanta. But what's he do at Atlanta? He doesn't apologize, but he says, I'm young, I'm gonna make these mistakes, and if I'm ever gonna run up front, these mistakes are gonna be made. But you've got Ty Gibbs here, who is not that he's not running in the top 5, he's not even on the lead lap.
Right.
We're in the third stage. You're going to need probably two more cautions to even have a chance of winning this race. So I think it's honestly ridiculous that we really haven't seen a whole lot of speed in that Joe Gibbs car at all this year. Uh, which kind of reminds me that Riley Herbst. Have you really seen any speed in that 2311 car? Anyway, I honestly forgot that it was even a 2311 car.
I haven't really noticed him since Atlanta. That's a good point. Kind of forgot about him, but I'm not surprised either.
Yeah, but it just brings me back to the same point here that the young driver Ty Gibbs. I'm kind of on his side because you see Hocevar's not leaving yet, but you see his car's being worked on the left side, which gets worked on after the right side. The jack is no longer up on the left side, so Hocevar's going to be accelerating, and you still pull into your pit box. You don't exactly have to stop because you might have a car behind you. I don't know if he did at the time because of running in the back, but I it's tough. It's half racing incident. It's half you got to be more aware.
Right, 100%. And kind of bring me to a point that I was thinking about after this race was over. There's two types of young drivers that are coming up into the sport. On one hand, you got the drivers that have worked their entire career to get to this point and have had to work for everything that they've gotten. Kind of like a host of our, he was in the truck series for a really long time, moved up in Xfinity, and then got his cup ride with Spire, who is an underdeveloped team, and really worked his way into the Cup Series and has developed. And then on the other hand, you got Ty Gibbs and Austin Dillon and all these other guys that have came from money and grandfathers and owning a team and have been handed everything that they wanted and haven't had to work through anything. So, there's two types of guys, young guys, come up in this field, and I think you can tell which one I like more because I'm just sick of the whole getting handed everything and then blaming everyone else for everything that goes wrong.
Yeah, someone's got to say it. It's got to be put out publicly. Uh, you mentioned it. Hocevar's had a great racing life, his whole life. He's got everything he's deserved. I honestly hope for a championship for the guy at some point.
Mhm.
He's a great guy. He's doing great in a low developed Chevy team. When eventually he's a veteran, and I mean seasoned veteran, and you start to see these like Elliott Larson, you see these guys retire, and then those seats open at Hendrick. I would love to see Hocevar eventually in a Hendrick car when he's older. Because I could see some real speed in that car and definitely a championship contender. So I'm
Mhm.
really glad you mentioned that with Hocevar. But yeah, then you said Dylan Gibbs. Dylan has his wins in his career, but you see his win last year at Richmond. He's in third going into turn 3 on the last lap, and he wrecks both the guys in front of him.
Yeah,
So you have
it's
that,
ARCA stuff. It doesn't
yeah,
belong in
and
here.
then you have his super speedway race where he's running 34th. All 32 of the 34 cars in front of him wreck, and he leaves the wreck second or first, whatever it was. And
Yeah.
and he wins because he's got his teammate at the time, Tyler Reddick, right behind him to block for him the last 2 laps. So I don't know. It's just something that maybe NASCAR needs to add qualifications for them because maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't exactly know the history of Austin Dillon, but Ty Gibbs, he had, I think he had maybe a year, 2 years in ARCA where he didn't do great. He had Xfinity where he did okay for the equipment he was in, but he was wrecking guys. He wrecks Brandon Jones at Martinsville to win the race.
His
You know,
teammate.
yeah, his own teammate going in order for his teammate to make the playoffs when he's already locked in. So I don't know. There's these problems that NASCAR has with their development program, and there's a lot of ranting going on between other drivers, fans, analysts in the sport, critics. So there's a lot that NASCAR needs to do, and they're aware. So I just really hope they make the changes in the future.
Right. Perfect points, and you know, we'll move on a little bit from that. But there's a right and wrong way to do things when you're brought up in the sport. I get you stick up for yourself, but there's a right and a wrong way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as we move out of that rant, I feel like we're ranting this entire episode, but it's a lot to talk about. We'll move into another rant. Perfect timing. As we get this green flag run, if you can call it, for 2 laps. Ryan Blaney. I feel like remember that name from earlier.
He's still here. for not
He
long
is.
though,
Well, for
unfortunately.
not much longer. We see kind of a stack up on the back stretch, and Blaney kind of three wide with Gregson, Jones, and then Christopher Bell comes up and makes it four wide. And I do not think he realized he was four wide. He came up across, kind of squeezed Blaney in, and Blaney moved up, didn't really realize how much room he had, and then kind of self spins himself off of Eric Jones' nose, collecting Gregson. Wallace a little bit, got some damage there, and Dylan. So just really, really frustrating stuff for that 12 team.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. In my opinion, I don't put this fault on any of the drivers within, w- even in this race. I don't think that crash was on a single driver. The people that I believe that crash was on stand on the top of the grandstands, being your spotters. You know,
Hmm.
if you're Chris Bell's spotter, I think you have got to be telling him. You have I don't know what he might have been saying, but you've got to say four wide, four, four, four. Blaney, I don't know what Tim Fetta was saying in there. Probably saying middle four. Eric Jones, Noah Gregson, they're on the outside. They can't move because they've got the wall on their outside, which obviously doesn't move. They've got cars pushing up on them, pushing them into the wall, and they're getting pushed from behind. The only place they've got to go is forward and right into the wall and basically ride the wall going down the back straightaway. So I personally don't think there's any driver to blame this on because I know for a fact Chris Bell, he's a great driver. He doesn't make this mistake, unless he's trying to race someone hard. And I personally don't think he was trying to do anything hard here besides gain spots going four wide off a restart.
Yeah, fantastic points because a lot of people would get mad and say, "Oh, it's Chris Bell's fault." And point, I mean, we're not racing in third person. You can't tell you're four wide. That's the whole reason spotters. If you could do that, spotters wouldn't exist. So 100% on the spotter's fault, and even a little bit on Blaney's spotter. He had room and just kind of. I don't even think he realized that there was two cars on top of him. He was middle four, so just it's frustrating for him, but I don't really pin the blame on anyone there.
Yeah, I would say, I believe you hear communications. You hear, we've heard Gregson's radio communication. At least I have. I don't know if you have, but he basically said, "What the heck? What are we doing?" Blaney wasn't actually even mad when he crashed, which is relatively surprised for such an emotional driver with Blaney. But he basically said, "Ugh, what happened?"
Yeah.
It's a restart. And it's absolute craziness. But those are what the spotters are for. They've got to be better there. That's all I've
Yep.
got on that.
Yeah, that's great points. That's all I have to say on that either. But as we move into the pit stops, not too much craziness, but we will start to see drivers stay in their pit stops longer for more fuel. So drivers are preparing for that fuel suit, if you want to call it, maybe trying to extend in case there's multiple overtimes or a long green flag run for the end of this race. But some smart decisions to make on pit road for this green flag run that we're about to see.
Yes. Something else I want to mention on the pit stops before we go green after the Blaney crash. We also had Stenhouse spin to the inside, which was on a completely different incident. Everyone saw him spin, starts looking at him, and then you got a big crash happening 15 cars up in front of him. So, unfortunately, Stenhouse, who had a great day going, people might not have seen it, but Stenhouse, I believe, was running inside the top 20 most of the day.
Yep. Yeah, he's had a fantastic season. So great
Yeah,
point to bring that up.
it's really a shame to see him go down here around lap 200. I think he had AJ pushing him from behind, just trying to move forward down the back straightaway, and I don't know if he got him awkwardly or whatever, and just kind of spun him to the infield. We've seen that exact same spin before. At some faster tracks, we've even seen it lead to flips. So thankfully, we didn't see any worse than a spin. And I want to mention again, it's another great job done by Stenhouse. This is a second compliment this race for a guy whose nickname is Recky Spinhouse, and getting two compliments at a track that he's not even supposed to be good at is a great job by him. But what I want to say here is it's a great save. He never even hits the wall, and he is
Mhm.
spinning fast towards that inside wall. So he doesn't even have damage. He gets back to the pits and he slaps on new tires before the restart.
Yeah, great point. I kind of even forgot about that a little bit. So good points to bring that back up. But here's where we finally see, I feel like our first green flag run since the first stage. I feel like we've even talked about it, but Reddick will take lead with Suarez on his outside, so a new name up there that we haven't really seen in this race. But quickly after that, SVG just has another little contact in turn two, but he will, make his way back to pit road safe and sound. But here's where we kind of see some unscheduled stops, I guess you can kind of say, from Hocevar and a couple other drivers that were, in the 20th to 25th range. Nothing really to note about from me there.
Yeah, following that, we see Hamlin and McDowell are close for third. And Hamlin, look at this after his huge win in the Vegas casino. I don't know if you heard of that. His what did he win? $100,000 in a Vegas casino. I know this is a NASCAR podcast, but are you kidding me?
Something like that.
You would think he spent all his luck prior to this race, but here he is running third with 40 laps to go, and you've got all four basically under a blanket within less than a second. And Suarez will dive to the inside and pull up side by side with Reddick for the lead, where then he will clear Reddick off of turn 4.
Yeah, and Daniel Suarez has always been that kind of guy that has speed has speed at these 1.5 mile tracks, but it's hard for him to get in that clean air sometimes. So, and he will clear, like you said, Reddick for the lead with ease. I mean, so just great stuff there. And here's where we can finally bring back Josh Berry, who we were kind of commenting on earlier in stage one and a little bit of stage two that we said would bring back up. So he makes his way into the top five. As we kind of see this three-way battle with Logano, Hamlin, and Reddick for second, so it will kind of bring him closer up to those leaders.
Yeah, he's lurking in the top 5. He started 7th. You mentioned he's having an absolute great day. He's kind of just sitting there. No one really sees him. That 21 car, they're like, he's not a threat, right? He's sitting there. And I want to go back and mention Suarez again. You had said he's putting together a great race, but besides SVG, who I think it's kind of just growing pains right now, especially at these more NASCAR style tracks like Vegas and Miami this weekend or this upcoming weekend. We're going to kind of continue to see those growing pains with him. But both the Trackhouse cars, they're fast. We see Chastain running up front on his 2 tires stop. He led, I think, 4 or 5 laps on his 2 tires before being caught by Larson and Byron, where he would claim 7 stage points. Or, 8 stage points. So he puts together a great second stage there. And now you see he basically passes the baton to his 99 number teammate, Suarez, who is going to see if he can close this race out.
Yep, and great points there. And kind of as we were seeing this three-way battle for second, like I was mentioning, we kind of see these drivers coming to pit road who didn't take as much fuel as some other drivers. So Hammond pits from fourth and Reddick pits from third. Reddick would kind of experience a little bit of a stop issues with that left rear tire, like I was mentioning earlier, slowness there. But here's where we finally see Josh Berry, who took extra fuel at that pit stop that I said after the Blaney wreck. And obviously Logano took more fuel like he always does. The fuel suit kind of nickname came from him, but we'll see Logano and Berry maintain that lead.
Yeah, well, Suarez will drop back. I believe he'll pit along with Reddick. Reddick, you'll actually see his race pretty much come to an end. You mentioned that he had issues, but that'll pretty much end his race, I believe, as Boyer mentioned, which is really unfortunate for him. He had a great day going, but this upcoming weekend in Miami Homestead, there will be no shot that he won't be a contender to win this upcoming weekend's race. So. He'll be right up there running his line with his pal, Kyle Larson, all the way up top, basically scraping the wall. But moving away from him, you mentioned Barry out in front with that fuel, where him and his buddy Logano, you mentioned as well with all the fuel, he will end up becoming our new leader. But what does he have to do? He realizes he's short on fuel. Coleman Presley, his spotter, tells him he needs to kind of slow down, where Barry will pull right back up to him, and he'll pull right back up to the lead.
Yep, great points there. And his lead is kind of short-lived, if you want to call it that. Excuse me. But we'll kind of see the caution break up the period, the green flag run that we had. And this is a wreck that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on. But we experience Noah Gragson has a right front tire failure that kind of explodes that front panel from the wheelbase, and as he spins down onto the apron, that tire looked like it was hanging on by a thread. It was a very interesting wreck.
Yeah, he kind of looked like Cody Ware's tire earlier in the race. And I'm
Yeah.
going to be honest with you, this is what should be happening in NASCAR races. Instead of seeing these wheels flying off and bouncing off the infield wall and flying 10 feet into the air, this is what should be happening. The tires should be blowing because they're getting pushed to the limit, but they should be staying on the car. You know, some people say they're like, well, this is crazy. You're tearing up race cars. It's crap. Well, in my opinion, this is what should be happening. Wheel stays on the car, driver's fine, fans are safe. There's no threat besides the fact that the caution's brought out and that his day's done. But that it's part of the sport.
Yeah, great points. And I don't want to jump the gun, um, but this is kind of where my mind first goes. Could it be a one lug nut issue? We had the five lug nuts with the car. Understand the lug nut's huge, but one lug nut holding a car in going 185 miles per hour consistently, is that a problem? Weigh the pros and cons with this tire.
Yeah, the fact is, it gives you the faster pit stop, and you're using this big old lug nut. But how safe is it? Maybe it needs to be reevaluated. Maybe it needs to be taken to the R&D center. After this season and looked out more thoroughly, or over the All-Star break, where they're still racing that week, but or they'll even have their off weeks for the holiday coming up. I believe they take off for, if not Easter, another holiday coming
Mhm.
up over the summer.
Right. Yeah.
But this issue, it will be figured out. I have faith that it will be, and I believe that NASCAR will make the right decision when the time comes.
Yeah. Hopefully. And I know you're kind of big on the tire failures. So great points from you this entire podcast on that. But excuse me, got some throat problems. But as we move further into this race after the pit stops and everything work their magic, we see Daniel Suarez and Josh Berry leading us into this green flag run. Suarez had a very strong car for this last little section. Kind of got a second wind after that first stage. And the second stage, he was running pretty poorly, but car kind of finally found its balance. And then we kind of see the Barry and Suarez battle, and then we see William Byron make his presence known for Ross Chastain, and them battling for third. Um, and then kind of further into that, we see Chastain, obviously a driver that's very aggressive and won't give up an inch, kind of blocking Byron a little bit, and kind of made Suarez and Barry pull ahead a little bit, if you can say.
Yeah, but something else that does there is it brings the 60 car in the picture. A lot of
Yep.
people that if this is your first year watching NASCAR, you might know honestly better than some people that have been watching longer. But Ryan Preece, this is a driver that has had a ton of NASCAR history, and this is the definition of a NASCAR driver, in my opinion. I might get a lot of dislike or even hate for this, but I think Ryan Preece is a great NASCAR driver
I agree.
because if you put that man in the right equipment and give him what he wants, he will run good for you. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be a super speedway. It doesn't have to be an oval. It doesn't have to be whatever it is. This guy, he'll find his way. So you've got Jack Roush and Brad Keselowski putting him in this great equipment in this 60 car. We haven't even really heard of the 60 car since I think David Reagan trying to qualify for last year's 500. But
Mhm.
it's a great job by Ryan Preece full time in that car so far this year. I've got really nothing else to say there. But moving on from there, you've got Barry, who will finally pass Suarez after their great battle. I believe they were side by side for even 3 or 4 laps. And Ryan Preece will sneak by Chastain and Byron as they're using up their stuff trying to battle each other and get in front of each other. Preece will say, "See you guys." He passes on the bottom, moves up to third. So now we got a Barry Suarez 1-2-3 at Las Vegas, a classic NASCAR oval. So isn't this really amazing?
Yeah, and great points on the Priest. Just a little point from me. Another driver that had to really work for everything that he's earned, even going back to his JTG days on the 37 car. But that's just it for me on the Priest. But like you said, Priest kind of moves by Byron and Chastain as they're using up their stuff. Um, but Josh Berry and Suarez, the battle went on for, like you said, 3, 4 laps, and they were hauling the mail. Obviously, this may be either one of their only really opportunity to kind of get a win this season. You don't want to jump the gun, but with the win in your own system, it really makes you work for these wins.
Yeah, it really does. And it'll lead us to end up seeing this, which I find absolutely awesome, super wholesome, and congrats to him. But not only 7 laps after he passes Daniel Suarez, does Josh Berry bring home his first Cup Series win at Las Vegas. You got to give this guy almost an applause because he has been through it in the Xfinity Series with Dale Jr. A little bit of history on Josh Berry. I wanted to point this out, but Josh Berry wasn't even a NASCAR driver in for Dale Jr. He was actually a mechanic working in his shop,
Hmm.
working on these race cars until Dale Jr. said, or I believe it was Barry that brought it to Dale Jr. and he said, I'd be interested in racing one of your, driving one of your race cars. Dale Jr. says, you know what, I'm gonna take a shot with this kid. Throws him in the car, starts to click right away. He has a great Xfinity Series time. Is basically thrown into the deep end once he enters the Cup Series, driving for Chase Elliott while he was out hurt for a few races, going between him and LaJoy. He's in the 4 car after Harvick retires. Uh, Basically, they have no setup there. And then Harrison Burton, who struggled in the Cup Series, finally brings home his first win last year in the Coke 400 at Daytona in the summer race. But then he's thrown into this 21 car, and you're basically saying that this guy's got no shot. This is the most unknown driver that's ever been thrown into this 21 car. There's no way he's going to win. And then here he is winning at one of NASCAR's most, most not basic, but most common tracks you think of when you think of NASCAR style racing. So I just got to give a huge congratulations to Josh Berry and that 21 team.
Yeah, great shout out. And I'll touch on a little bit as well. Josh Berry was one of those. He's an older driver that was in the Xfinity Series, obviously being a mechanic for Junior's team. But always been that mature guy and that level headed guy. A guy you can really kind of click with if he's on your team or he's a manufacturing partner. Um, but he ran for Chase Elliott when he had that injury 2 years ago, and he finished second, I think, in Richmond in one of the races and looked very strong. So that's kind of where his turning point was to say, hey, I'm not a driver that's going to be taken lightly. And then he got that 4 car right after Harvick retired and did well with what the team had to offer. Um, in that kind of Daytona summer race, if he kind of didn't have that really bad wreck, I mean, he was running top 5 pretty much that last stage. But just incredible stuff to see him get this win at Las Vegas, which was one of the hardest tracks because it's mastered by so many of these top guys. But I mean, Wood Brothers, switching from Harrison Burton to Josh Berry, it's just an elite move for that team, and I'm hoping he does well the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. He's really a hard guy to hate, if that makes it
All right,
if that
good
makes
point.
sense. That you see a lot of drivers, they've got these huge personalities, and Josh Berry, he's really not a big personality guy, but he's hard to dislike. He doesn't do anything outside of, so say, the law in terms of NASCAR. He doesn't really cause any havoc with his personality, but he's there. He's here to race, and I think this kid's got a bright future. I say kid, even with Barry, basically being a veteran at this point. Well, not exactly in the Cup Series, but in NASCAR in general. But I think he's got a bright future in front of him. Maybe not even with that 21 car, but who knows if Logano or one of those Penske guys or whatever doesn't have a whole lot of time left. Maybe a spot's going to open. Or maybe a team change gets made. But I think if Josh Berry would find himself in better equipment, I think that's going to be a hard car to beat.
Yeah, perfect points, and that's it for me. Basically, on the race, I'll kind of continue this segment I've been doing these past couple weeks, and I'll just kind of shout out some drivers who had some really good bright spots, and we have a lot of them. Top 3, I could basically say. Barry in first, Suarez second, Priest in third. Great job from them today. AJ Allmendinger, we didn't even comment on this race, got a top 10 and eighth, and then Keselowski finishing in 11th. You're like, might be saying, that's not really something to know. Well, he's had a really rough time this season. So getting a top 15 is an incredible job for him at the start of the season. And then, Briscoe rebounding and getting that 17th after all the trouble that he's had today. Just great stuff from those drivers overall.
Yeah, and I want to go back and I want to mention on Keselowski. He's been off to an absolute abysmal start to the season, and this is a driver that, especially in NASCAR for his past, he's not exactly likable. But this is a guy that he's an owner now. He's a lot more civilized than he used to be, so to say. And I feel for the guy. He's becoming a better guy, and he's getting worse race results.
Hmm.
So I really, honestly, I know you might actually be against me here, but I kind of hope he finds his momentum here and it uses this, and I kind of hope that 6 car finds victory lane again this year. He saw Darlington, was it last year or maybe even
Yep,
2 years ago at this
last
point,
year.
but I. I hope that 6 car, continues to win, and I want to see Brad Keselowski back at the front.
Yeah, and I just to comment the last comments here for Keselowski, as he's kind of taken on this ownership role, I kind of had a little bit of a change of heart for him. I always wasn't the biggest fan of him, but he's got a lot on his plate dealing with one of the top kind of 10 teams in the Cup Series, top 5 even. So being a racer being a driver and an owner is one of the hardest things to do in all of the sports. So I feel for the guy, and he's been a lot more likable, since he kind of matured up and took this leadership role. So he's just a true stock car racer. He's the physical he's just the physical person of what a stock car racer means, what an American is, always has an American flag when he wins that race. So kind of had a change of heart for him, but that's all I got to say on the race.
Yeah, it's what you like to see in NASCAR. It's very similar to Josh Berry. But that's all we got there, and I'll let you go into your segment that we started last week, and
Yep.
I'll allow you to kick it off here. Moving on to next week.
All right, so next week, guys. Well, not next week. In a couple days, we don't really have a typical schedule for these podcasts. We kind of just do them as we please. But we have the Straight Talk Wireless 400 at Homestead. Finally, Homestead is back on the regular season, not just in the playoffs. And oh boy, so obviously don't remember what the segment is. We just pick who we think will win. We keep track of this, and at the end of the season, we will tally it up and see who is the best predictor. So I'll let you go first.
Yeah, this is someone that he's kind of been hiding in the shadows this year. He really, he made the playoffs. Well, he's known for making the playoffs, but he can never finish it off. He hasn't been up front a whole lot, but he had a great third stage here at Vegas. Unfortunately, he will end up finishing 25th after falling to the back after a tough battle in the third stage at Vegas. But and a crew chief change, but I got to go with none other than the veteran. Denny Hamlin in the 11 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This guy, he was seen last year at Homestead, Miami. He was practically in the lead going into the last lap until he was passed by Blaney, who was inevitably passed by Reddick in the last 2 corners. But, this is that veteran presence, which is needed at Homestead. It's a hard racetrack. This is going to be a guy that's he's going to be ready to play come Sunday.
Great pick, great pick. I'm sure that'll be hard to disagree with, but um, you know, might be speculating. Well, maybe I'm going to say Reddick. Maybe I'm saying Blaney, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pick the driver that's always there, but hasn't been able to finish or win a race this year. I'm going with the man, the myth, Kyle Larson, to get his first race win of the season. The way he's able to run Homestead is unlike anything I've ever seen. He gets inches away from that wall, and I think he's going to finally break through and get his first win of 2025.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. He was my number 2, right behind Hamlin. So I'm glad no one left him in the dust because I think our 2 guys might be dueling it out. It's gonna be a good one this
We'll see.
weekend.
Yeah, so fantastic podcast for you guys. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend as you're listening to this in your car ride, the gym, to grocery shop, whatever you're listening to this, maybe just at home. But that's all we have for the Pennzoil 400 presented by Jiffy Lube at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. We will see you guys next week for Homestead recap. See you later, guys.
See ya.